The old house stood at the edge of town, surrounded by a tangle of weeds and shadowed by gnarled trees. It had been empty for years, its windows like vacant eyes. Locals whispered tales of it being haunted. Kids dared each other to go near it, but no one dared to enter until now. Tommy and Billy, two adventurous boys of 13, stood before the dilapidated gate. The late afternoon sun cast long, eerie shadows. "You scared, Tommy?" taunted Billy. Tommy scoffed, trying to hide his nervousness. He wasn't about to back down from a dare, especially not from Billy. "No way," he retorted. "Let's do it." They pushed open the creaking gate. Its hinges groaned in protest. The sound sent shivers down their spines. As they walked toward the house, the air grew heavy. A palpable sense of dread settled upon them. Ignoring their growing unease, they approached the front porch. The wooden steps groaned ominously under their weight, each creak echoing the years of neglect and decay. One of the steps crumbled into dust, a testament to the house's long abandonment and the relentless passage of time. They carefully made their way onto the porch, the boards beneath their feet threatening to give way with every cautious step. The front door hung precariously from one hinge, swaying slightly in the breeze as if it could fall off at any moment. It was an open invitation into the unknown, a gaping maw that seemed to beckon them forward. A gust of wind slammed the door against the wall, the sudden noise startling them. The sound echoed through the house like a scream, reverberating off the walls and adding to the eerie atmosphere. Tommy and Billy exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. Steeling themselves, they stepped over the threshold, their hearts pounding in their chests. The air inside was thick with the smell of decay, a pungent reminder of the house's long-forgotten past. Dust motes danced in the faint rays of sunlight that pierced through the grimy windows. Cobwebs draped every corner, like the house was wrapped in a shroud of neglect. The floor was littered with debris, broken pieces of furniture, and remnants of a life long abandoned. It was as if time itself had stopped within these walls, preserving the house in a state of perpetual decay. They ventured further into the house, each step taking them deeper into the unknown. Their footsteps echoed in the silence, a stark reminder of their isolation in this forgotten place. Each step seemed to amplify their fear, the creaking floorboards sounding like whispers of the past. They found themselves in what was once the living room, now a shadow of its former self. A fireplace dominated one wall, its once warm hearth now cold and lifeless. Above it hung a dusty, cracked mirror reflecting the room's desolation. Tommy swore he saw a fleeting figure in its reflection, a ghostly presence that sent a chill down his spine. But when he blinked, it was gone, leaving him to wonder if his mind was playing tricks on him. Billy wandered over to a wall where the paint was peeling. The old house had an eerie silence, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards under their feet. Beneath a layer of grime, something was scrawled. It was almost hidden, as if it didn't want to be found. They leaned closer, their hearts pounding. The air felt thick with anticipation and a hint of dread. The message was faint but clear. It seemed to whisper to them from the past. It was written in what looked like charcoal. The strokes were hurried, almost desperate. It simply said, "Get out." The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Tommy laughed nervously. The sound echoed unnaturally in the empty space. "Someone's trying to scare us," he said. But his voice wavered, betraying his attempt at bravado, but his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. The unease was palpable. Billy ran his hand along the rough wall. He wasn't laughing. The texture of the wall felt like a warning. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, very wrong. The air seemed to grow colder, very wrong. They continued their exploration, moving cautiously from room to room. Each step felt heavier than the last. Each room was in a similar state of disrepair. The decay was almost tangible, like the house was slowly being consumed by time. Each one filled with an unsettling silence. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, in what was once the dining room, they found another message. This one was more ominous. This one was scrawled on the floor in a dark, viscous substance that looked eerily like dried blood. The sight of it made their skin crawl. The message sent chills down their spines. It felt like a direct threat. It read, "I'm watching you." The words seemed to stare back at them, unblinking and menacing. A cold draft snaked around their ankles. It seemed to originate from the hallway that led to the staircase. The boys looked at each other, their eyes wide with fear. Curiosity warred with terror. "Should we go upstairs?" whispered Tommy. His voice trembled slightly. Billy hesitated. He could feel a knot of dread tightening in his stomach, but something compelled him forward. "Just one look," he said. He tried to sound brave, but his voice betrayed his fear. They slowly made their way to the staircase. Each step creaked ominously. The railing, rotten with age, threatened to give way. As they reached the top of the stairs, a loud bang echoed from the end of the hallway. Tommy jumped back, bumping into Billy. They both froze, their blood turning to ice. They listened intently, but the silence was absolute. The hallway was dark and narrow, its walls closing in like the jaws of a trap. The only light came from a small window at the far end, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the walls. They cautiously moved forward, their hearts pounding against their ribs, each step echoing in the silence. The floorboards creaked under their weight, the sound amplifying their growing sense of dread. As they approached the last door on the right, they noticed something strange, a chill running down their spines. A faint, rhythmic thumping sound seemed to be coming from inside, like a heartbeat echoing in the darkness. Billy reached for the doorknob, his hand trembling as he touched the cold metal. It was cold and damp to the touch, sending a shiver up his arm. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly turned it. The door creaked open, revealing the unknown. The room was dimly lit by a single, dusty window, casting a pale light that barely pierced the gloom. The air was thick with the smell of decay, a nauseating stench that made them gag. And then they saw it, the source of the horror that had drawn them here. In the center of the room, lying on a pile of rotting floorboards, was a human skull, its presence both shocking and surreal. Its empty sockets seemed to stare at them with silent accusation, as if blaming them for its lonely fate. Tommy screamed. Billy stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, his mind reeling from the side. He fell hard, landing on the dusty floor with a thud that echoed in the silent room. He scrambled backwards, his eyes fixed on the gruesome sight, unable to look away from the horror before him. Tommy, paralyzed with fear, could only stare at the skull. His mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. He felt a scream building in his chest, but no sound came out. Billy, his voice hoarse with terror, finally managed to choke out, "We have to get out of here!" The words jolted Tommy back to reality. He turned and ran, his fear lending him speed. He didn't look back. He could hear Billy's footsteps pounding behind him. They raced down the hallway, their footsteps echoing in the silence. They didn't stop until they burst out of the house and into the relative safety of the fading daylight. Gasping for breath, they stumbled into the woods. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of town. Tommy collapsed onto the curb, his chest heaving. Billy wasn't much better off. He leaned against a tree, his face pale and sweaty. The police arrived quickly. Tommy and Billy, still shaken, recounted their horrifying experience. Officers, skeptical but thorough, accompanied the boys back to the house. They searched the house from top to bottom, but their search yielded nothing. There was no sign of the skull, no sign of any human remains. The messages on the walls, gone. The police, finding no evidence to support the boys' claims, concluded that it was a prank, a cruel trick played by some local kids. But Tommy and Billy knew what they had seen. They knew the truth. The house remained abandoned. Even the most daring teenagers refused to go near it. The whispers of it being haunted grew louder. The story of the skull became local legend. Tommy and Billy tried to put the experience behind them, but the memory of that day continued to haunt them. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something sinister, something that they couldn't explain. What was the meaning of the messages on the walls? Who put the skull in that room, and why? These questions lingered in their minds, unanswered. The experience had changed them. They were no longer the carefree boys who had dared each other to enter the abandoned house. They had glimpsed a darkness that day, a darkness that clung to the edges of their reality. The experience had forged a bond between them, a bond built on shared terror and unspoken understanding. They never spoke of that day again, but the memory remained, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary world. Years later, long after they had left their childhood town behind, the memory of the abandoned house and the skull continued to haunt their dreams. They had both moved on with their lives, but the experience had left an indelible mark on their psyches, a constant reminder that some things are best left undisturbed. The old house still stood at the edge of town, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets, and Tommy and Billy, forever bound by their shared experience, carried the weight of that day with them, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved.